This is the page in the Retina Reflex IV service manual that describes how the cord is wrapped around the drums. So this is not to scale, and it can be a bit hard to see exactly how all this fits together. This piece here, this represents the cable drum that'll go at the top of the camera. This piece. And this here is to indicate where the cutout is, where the cord will get locked to it. This stack here represents two small pulleys which are here on the camera body. And this is to show you the direction that the cord travels in. So that the cord comes around the back of the large pulley here. From the front it goes to the lower of those two pulleys. And from this side it goes to the upper of the two pulleys. Likewise, this drawing here shows you the position of the rollers here and here. And this describes how the cord is run around them. This piece here, it's not exactly in proportion. That's the cable drum that goes at the bottom here. So this is an expanded drawing, if you like, showing you the wrap of that cord, how it runs around that cord, the directions it runs, and where it goes to. So it says here that this piece here runs under there, goes to the lower rear roller, which would be the one closest to the back of the camera, and so forth. So it's important to have a diagram like this in front of you, or something else that you've taken photos of. It's very hard to actually take photos of the run of the cord so that it's completely clear exactly what goes where. But this is the answer now. The cord run on the Reflex 4 is not the same as the cord run on the Reflex S, for example. So it's quite important to note exactly where things go. One of the problems I have struck before is where I've mistakenly taken the cord run, the wrong one, to the wrong roller, and ended up basically with the drum at the bottom of the camera turning the wrong way relative to the drum at the top. And of course that's awful. You can set your meter up so it works exactly perfectly, but when you move your settings in one direction, the meter suddenly goes off in the other direction. Very disconcerting. And then of course you've got to pull the entire camera apart to put the cord back where it should be. I've done it. It's an easy enough mistake to make. I'm not sure if I've done it twice. I'm absolutely certain I haven't done it 3 times. I've learnt my lessons. Always have a diagram in front of you that you can refer back to, because memories can be fallible. And I see a few of these cameras. I'm probably more familiar than most with how the cord's to run, but I wouldn't rely on my memory to tell me. I always refer back to a diagram. Anyway, with this piece out of the way, I'll get back to doing the actual camera. Since I have the cord conveniently fixed to the drum here already, I'm going to use that to start. I'll start from that position, I think. So I'll just apply a little bit of synthetic grease. What's happened to my light? Hang on, it's suddenly night time here. Oh, it's that flaming mirror. Hang on. That's a bit better. That was the reflex mirror reflecting directly up into the digital camera and making the exposure, I'll do it again, making the exposure go awful. Alright, see if we can do this, that's better. Okay, So just give that a wipe with a bit of synthetic grease. Have the fixing screw. And the cord's going to run round that way. Of course, I've got to get the cord down this gap behind the pulleys here. There's a felt pad under there. It's not really a light trap, it's probably a dust trap if anything. I've got a little loop of wire here. This was a sandwich bag tie, the plastic peeled back. Nice thin wire, easily dealt with. So I'll slide that up through that slot from below and pull the cords through. I'll just do those one at a time. And the same with the other one. That knot doesn't want to come through, let's move it over a bit. Not much room past that pulley, I'm going to cheat. I'll slacken off these two screws that hold that twin pulley in place, which will just give me a bit more space. There, now I've pulled that through and push that back where it came from. Tighten those screws up. Okay, so got our cords. See if I can get these correctly positioned. The one that comes from this direction round here goes to the lower pulley, and from the lower pulley here it goes to the front roller here. The cord running round this way goes to the upper pulley at this point and to the rear roller here, like that. Now I've got to keep these cords parallel, making sure they're not crossing over each other or anything, otherwise I'll end up with stuff turning the wrong way, and run them over this set of rollers. I'm checking my alignment to make sure I've got nothing crossed over. That's looking good. And there's a little brass retaining screw here that will prevent that cord from falling off the rollers at this point. So at this point I've got my cord connected at the top, run around the rollers directly at the top, and I've got to put my bottom roller in place. Now I'm just going to turn this, keeping some tension on the cord, to get this to the rest position I start with, which is with this notch that you can see with the lacquer on it pointing to the front. Somewhere about there. And I will check my cord lays again to make sure I've got this correct. Bottom to the front, top to the rear. Bottom, yeah, no, that's good. I've got that correct at the top of the camera. At the bottom of the camera, this is our rear cord from the rear rollers here. That's the shorter cord in this case. That goes to around the roller here. It goes around this way, anti-clockwise. I've got to put the front cord on first. It's easier to get the front cord in place first. This cord here, it's easier to get that in place, then put the other one in place. And I'm going to apply a bit of synthetic grease to the post that that drum will run on. Doesn't need an awful lot, just needs to make sure that that'll run nice and smoothly. And take my front cord. There are two slots in here. You can pick either one. And it's got to run around the drum and it comes off the top of the drum. So it's got to run in this direction. Keeping a little bit of tension on that so I don't lose anything. This cord picks up in the other slot. And runs around the drum the other way. Like that. That should go over the post now. Now the manual tells me that that stud should be at the 11 o'clock position, I believe. Does it say 11 o'clock? Yeah. I've got it here at the 5 o'clock position. In practice, it doesn't matter which way up you've got that, just so long it's in that alignment. If I'd chosen to start my cord on the opposite slots, that would have been absolutely correct. It doesn't matter, functionally that'll do the job. The spring has to go in place here. This just keeps the whole lot under tension. I'm going to tuck that down in there. And hook that bit back against the body. Drops into the recess. So now it's got tension on there, which basically means that it should run smoothly and there shouldn't be any noticeable backlash in the system. I'm just looking closely at my pulleys to make sure that everything moves smoothly. Seems to go well. I'll try and get my knots, the beginning of the cord, to the front of the pulley in one case and to the back of the pulley in the other, so that the cord runs smoothly on that pulley. And it's not crossing over, otherwise you get a jump as the cord crosses over. So I'll just release that tension. That, I think, is as close as I'm going to get with that. That appears to be fine. Okay, so we've got my meter drums back on the camera. That's all good. I've got my stud here which couples to the back of the drum here, 180 degrees out from where it should be, but the slot's continuous across that piece, so it doesn't make any difference in practice. It can start in one position or it can start in the other. That's fine. At this stage, I'm done with the body. I can't really go any further with this now until I've got the shutter ready to go back into it. And so my next task is to strip and service the shutter. I'll start here by removing the front rings. This is our flash connection for the top of the camera. That wire is only soldered on to the flash contact on the body at this point. It's not uncommon for that to get that solder joint to break while you're handling this, and you have to put it back later. Don't lose any sleep over that. That's just one of the things that the troubles that you can have. So we've got 3 screws hold this in place. I've already had this off once, of course, when I was diagnosing the camera to see what had caused the problems. We'll have that lot off and put that to one side. There's a pinion here and this pinion runs all the way through and actually couples to the drum here at the back, or the connection for the drum at the back. Getting the shutter itself off here, this is where we start to have to do more work. So there are 2 screws hold this bracket in place. Now looking at this, no one has ever had this shutter out of this camera before. Certainly somebody had the top off the camera. Certainly somebody had the front rings off the shutter, but no one has delved in as deep as this before. And I can tell because I'm not seeing any extra adhesive here, which you would have seen at this point, and that this flash connection here is exceptionally neat and tidy. Doesn't look to me like anyone's had that apart and remade the joint. There's 2 spacer washers. This is our little cocking rack, the internal rack which couples the main cocking action for the shutter, which happens on that shaft, with the action that opens the blades for viewing, which happens under here. That screw is very tight, which is quite normal. It's a shoulder screw. This bracket pivots on that shoulder screw. I'm seeing if I can get this out without any arguments. It's got a little plastic insulator on the end, which sometimes you can wriggle out past that bracket like that, and other times you've got to loosen that screw and loosen that bracket to get it past. The shoulder on that screw also passes through this centre or core, which this gear, this little wheel runs around. And that's where the cocking action comes through from the camera body. This piece is a leaf spring under here, which holds down this little pinion. It's got a little tiny washer on the top there, a little shim. That's very easily lost. Watch out for that. This is the arm that swings around when you cock the camera to open the shutter blades for viewing. There's another washer here, another spacer, fine shim. It's set behind that. I've got to go and desolder this wire here, that's our flash connection, and then carry on from there. Alright, with that wire desoldered, I can remove the 4 screws that hold the shutter to the front mount. Those 2 are easily seen. There's 2 here, one down here and one down here. Alright, let's see if we've got all of those loose. That's our 4 screws. The shutter should come off now. Here we go, so that's our shutter with the focus mount on the front. And here's the front of the camera. So this I'm going to strip down a bit further just to tidy things up. So I'll take that spring out. I want to just take this piece off, make sure it's all clean and moves smoothly. I can see a bit of grease on there, which is, if it's not causing a problem at the moment, it'll probably cause a problem later on. I'll have that off. That large screw. Sometimes it's useful to have a decent sized screwdriver that you can get a good grip on. And I can remove that, that's our shutter release. That is about as far as I need to strip that down. While I've got all this at this point, I'll clean this muck off the front. That's the glue and residue from the leatherette from the front of the camera, which I've already cleaned off the camera body. So I'll pop that to one side. And here's the shutter itself, which I'll deal with shortly. First I'll just get rid of this rubbish. Basically here all I've got to do is scrape with the scalpel and use some of that solvent to get rid of that rubbish off there. Now when I'm using that CRC Lectra clean, I've got to be careful not to get it all over the leatherette patch up here, because leatherette doesn't like that stuff. It'll melt the leatherette, it'll make a mess of it. So I've got to keep it away from the leatherette. But with careful work I can get that clean, so I'll deal with that. There's nothing exciting there. Okay, that's going fairly well. I'll use a wooden toothpick to get the rest of that off. That's going well, and I'll just use a cotton bud to clean up the last of that residue, and then that side will be nice and clean, and then I'll deal with the other side.